Hello everybody, I'm just going to give it a wee minute or two just to see if anybody's going to jump in. Tonight I am going to be talking a wee bit about self-sabotage and why do we get in our own way, basically, whenever we're trying to make changes, whenever we're trying to achieve things. Why do we end up always kind of tripping ourselves up? And it's something I think that we are all guilty of, and it's something that certainly that I know that I will do from time to time, and that I have to really look at it. Why do I get into these situations where I'm full of great intentions and then you end up hitting the kind of F it button and messing it all up? So I thought I would talk a wee bit about, when it comes to things like changing your eating habits, when it comes to maybe trying to improve your health or trying to lose weight, why, do we seem to only be able to make these changes for like a short period of time, and we can't seem to be consistent or to stick with them? And funny, just before I came on to do this live, I was kind of scrolling through my Facebook feed, and someone had done a post, and they were asking in the post something like, do carbs make you gain weight? And there was loads and loads of comments about it, and people disagreeing about whether carbs make you gain weight and all this kind of stuff. But someone in the comments had actually written, being greedy, overindulgent, and having no willpower is what makes you gain weight. And I thought, God, that is such an interesting comment, and it really jumped out at me, because I think that is what so many of us believe. That in order to change, in order to lose weight, in order to get healthy, to get fit, whatever the goal may be for you, that you're relying on willpower. And the problem with willpower is we only have a finite amount of it. So we can't rely on willpower in order to make lasting changes. We have to understand what's going on at a deeper level. So the best way that I can kind of explain it to you is really by looking at like how does our brain actually work. We have conscious mind and we have subconscious mind. The conscious mind is only responsible for about 5 to 10% of what we think. That actually most of what we do is on autopilot, just completely running from our subconscious mind. So that kind of the 5% of conscious mind and conscious thinking, we will use that when we need to use that on a daily basis for things like, if we're using a sharp knife and we're cutting up food, we need our conscious mind to have awareness around what we're doing. Or when we are crossing the road, we will be consciously aware. So that's our conscious mind kind of keeping us safe and being alert. If we are going on, say, a diet or a weight loss plan, and say, for example, you are trying to cut chocolate, say, out of your diet, that if you're relying on willpower to stop you eating chocolate, what you're having to do is you're using up that 5% of your conscious thinking and that conscious effort to be resisting the chocolate and to be saying no to the chocolate. And the thing about willpower is that it will fatigue and that it will exhaust, and it's like using up energy. So if you're using up a lot of energy to always be saying no to something or to be denying yourself something, that eventually will fatigue, and we give in, and then we end up kind of crashing and going for the chocolate or going for the sweets or whatever it is. So what we need to try and change is the subconscious, because actually it's our subconscious that rules most of what we do all the time, and we do it on autopilot. And what our subconscious mind is really just doing is it has learnt patterns of behaviour from things that we have done, and that we have done them consistently enough and often enough that when we do it often enough, it just has become like autopilot. So if I give you an example, just kind of sticking with the chocolate, that maybe at some point, at some point in your life, maybe if your big issue, say, is that when you get really, really stressed or really overwhelmed, which is a really common thing, that you eat chocolate. Maybe at some point in your life, you've maybe felt really stressed, you felt really overwhelmed, and maybe think back to when you were younger. If whenever you were upset, maybe what did your mum do? Did she give you sweets? Did she give you chocolate to try and make you feel better? So possibly from a very, very young age that you maybe learnt that when you were upset or when you were overwhelmed or when you were feeling anxious, that you were given chocolate or you were given sweets in order to help you feel better. And let's face it, chocolate makes you feel good. It releases dopamine in the brain and it feels nice. So when you've done that from quite an early age, your brain has locked in that memory that actually that tasted really good. It made me feel really good. So it's locked it in your memory. So when you do it again, it goes, oh yeah, Jesus, this is really nice. And it locks it in again. And the more you have just repeated that, it's gone into your subconscious mind and it's been ingrained as a habit. So if you are now in a position where maybe you're trying to give up chocolate and you have a whole kind of lifelong learning of chocolate bringing you relief and chocolate bringing you comfort, you can understand now why it's actually so incredibly difficult to rely on willpower alone just to not have the chocolate, because everything in your subconscious mind and everything in your entire history of learning is that chocolate provides an outcome for you. It provides a relief and it makes you feel good. So relying on willpower to just resist that, you're going into an impossible battle. So I hope that kind of explains. Let me know kind of in the comments below, does that make sense? If you have any questions about it, please shout, put them in the comments, and I'll try and answer any questions you have. But I thought it was really important, I suppose, to make that distinction, because what we tend to do is that we will decide that we're going to make a change, i.e. I'm sticking with this chocolate because I'm on a roll with the chocolate, so I'm just going to stick with it. That if we've made that decision that we're just going to cut chocolate out of our diet and we're never going to eat it again, and then we get to day 3 or 4 of not having any and our willpower has well and truly fatigued and we end up eating loads and loads of chocolate, what we then do is we berate ourselves, we punish ourselves, and we give ourselves a really, really hard time for the fact that we have been weak, or that we don't have enough willpower in order to do this. And it's got nothing to do with willpower. You're just running on autopilot. So this is where, for like the work that I do, is really about trying to understand what's going on under the surface. So do we need to work on actually what's the trigger that's making you want to turn to the food in the first place? And for a lot of people, and especially women, it'll be stress. Stress will be the trigger that will make them want to go for sweet foods in particular. So is it that we need to work on how do we alleviate the stress underneath? And how do we break the chain where you would normally be reaching for those foods? So in those moments when you're feeling stressed and you're feeling overwhelmed, what's the kindest thing perhaps that you could do for yourself in that moment? And it might be going for a walk, going upstairs, having a bath, just taking time out, lighting a candle, reading a book, or whatever. So we'll look at, are there other ways that you can find that relief for those times when you feel triggered and when you feel overwhelmed? And it's also a really good, this is why things like EFT and tapping is really good when we are in these kind of feelings and these stress and overwhelm type feelings, because they will rewire the neural pathways in the brain and they will completely eliminate those kind of symptoms, those physical symptoms of stress that will also turn us to food. So that's why tapping is such a brilliant way of often eliminating kind of those cravings and removing those triggers and stressors that we will have for food. And maybe what I'll do on another one of the lives is even we can do like a little tapping demo together, which would be great. So that's kind of what's happening, I guess, at the surface level of why do we sabotage ourselves. So it's never intentional, that it tends to go tits up when we rely on willpower alone, because willpower is only finite, and what actually is running the show underneath is our subconscious programming, which is lifelong learning. And if your lifelong learning has been that certain foods provide comfort, reward, pleasure, whatever, it's very understandable that it is hard just to stop that based on that little bit of your conscious mind making that effort. So hopefully that makes sense. Please give me your questions, any comments that you have about that. So that's kind of what's happening up on the surface level when we are maybe sabotaging ourselves and falling into these patterns of starting every Monday full of great intentions and then falling flat on our face maybe on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Beneath that is kind of like a much more what I would kind of call, I would describe it quite often as our beliefs that we hold about ourselves, what we think and what we feel about ourselves at a much deeper level. So for example, like I would often work with a lot of clients that maybe at a very core level feel like in some way that they're not good enough, or like they are a failure, and that the language that they will use about themselves will be extremely critical and incredibly negative. And I kind of call that like either the core belief or really the identity that they hold about themselves. So for example, if you think, about your experiences in childhood, so when we talk about that subconscious programming and those lifelong kind of experiences that you have had, that if you have had maybe experiences from childhood, for example, these are just examples that I'm pulling out, that I have maybe seen, that say for example your mum maybe was overweight, maybe everybody in the family really struggled with their weight, maybe mum was always on and off diets, maybe the laughing joke was that you were the big one in the family, or that you are just big boned, that those kind of things are what those experiences again are in our mind, in our subconscious, and form our identity and our belief about ourselves. So what I will sometimes say is that if we're holding on to this deep belief about ourselves and we're trying to make conscious changes on the outside, say conscious changes to our weight or our appearance, but they are in direct conflict with this inner, deeper belief that we hold about ourselves, that there's a conflict there, and so it's never achieved. And this is where sometimes what I will see is that maybe someone has started off at a much bigger, a much heavier weight or a bigger body weight. They've lost maybe quite significant amount of weight, and then when they have got to a lower body weight, actually don't feel like themselves, or don't feel comfortable, or don't feel safe, and weight will often rebound. And that might look like failure, and that might look like sabotage, but what it actually is that there's kind of like a mismatch between who that person identifies as and how they feel about themselves with what they kind of the external and the physical appearance is. So what I want you to maybe have a think about is, if this applies to you and you maybe recognize that how you feel about yourself on the inside isn't great, that maybe you have a poor opinion of yourself, that maybe you're really critical of yourself. If you're holding that belief inside, which let's face it, so many of us do, that if you imagine then that the dialogue that goes through your mind is always really negative and is always really critical, it makes it really difficult for you to achieve what you actually want to achieve, because you're trying to come at it through a hypercritical mind. It's very hard to get a positive, lasting and sustainable outcome through criticism. So if you are using language like I just can't lose weight, I'm always on and off diets, I'm just rubbish at this, I'm just always going to be overweight, I'm never going to lose weight. If you're using loads of really, I can't exercise, or I'm never going to be able to do that, if all the dialogue and all the language and everything that you're saying in your mind is negative and saying that you can't do these things, your body's not going to respond in a positive way, and there will be a mismatch. So what I encourage you to do is, if you recognize that you're being really critical of yourself all the time, if you're saying lots of I can'ts, or if you're feeling like it's really impossible to make changes, I want you to try and change the record that's playing in your mind. And how can you use more encouraging and more supportive language, more more productive kind of dialogue that's more positive and is more likely to help keep you on track and keep you moving in the right direction. So what I like to do, and I will do this like for myself as well, that I will have for myself aspirations of things that I want to be better for myself in my life and in my career and in my work. And I'm not there yet, but what I like to do is I like to kind of imagine what would that look like. So if I was kind of the whole cliche, living my best life, if I was living my best life and was doing exactly the job I wanted, making the money that I wanted and feeling really happy and content with everything, what would I be doing? What would I be saying? What kind of places would I be going? What would my routines look like? What time would I be going to bed? What time would I be waking up? How would I spend my day? Who would I spend my day with? What kind of food would I be eating? And what I'll almost try to do is make like a little mini assessment of what's my life like at the minute versus who do I want to be and what do I want my life to look like. And then what I try and do is imagine, well, what would I think and I feel and be doing if I was doing that right now? So for yourself, if you are finding that you're always sabotaging, that you're trying to beat yourself up into changing, what I want you to do is to try to flip that around and imagine for yourself, what would you like to see for yourself? If you were achieving your goals and feeling content and feeling fulfilled and at the weight that you wanted or as healthy as you wanted to be, what would you be doing? And how can I start in small ways now to do that for myself now? And how can I change the language to be like a person who is over here achieving that and feeling in that way now? So my takeaway, I hope I've rambled on an awful lot there, but I hope that what I was saying, that some of it could resonate with you, that you kind of got some insight into the difference between your conscious and your subconscious mind, and how when we are looking at making lasting changes, if you're repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again, and you're in the same sabotage cycle over and over and over again, the problem isn't on a conscious level, it's on a subconscious level. And that's where I would be looking to go. How do I change my subconscious mind? How do I change my subconscious thinking? How do I change the dialogue in which I speak to myself about these issues that I'm having? And how do I flip it round to be more constructive, more helpful and more positive language that I'm using. Okay, I think I saw a few little things pop up. So is it possible to rewire the subconscious by retraining? Yeah, so with tapping, Pamela, what they have been able to show through MRI, through research that has been done and through MRI tests, they can actually show that the neural pathways in the brain can change through tapping. Now, I trained in tapping to use it for like food cravings and emotional eating with clients, but it can be used for loads of different issues. And it's most commonly actually used for post-traumatic stress disorder. And people will, when they're kind of in therapy and they're talking about their traumas and they're reliving their traumas, that when they're doing that whilst they're tapping, it actually changes the neural pathways in the brain to change the physical and the emotional response to traumatic memories, so that it no longer becomes an issue. So yeah, yes is yes is the short answer to your question. And Vashti, I sabotage at the weekend and nearly every weekend. And yeah, you know, that's such a common one, like, and who isn't guilty of that? And I think again, you know, that comes down to the subconscious. So again, I think we are so used to the weekend is when the wheels come off and we let loose. So we get used to that's what the weekends are for. But then I think there is also an element of that we, you know, the things that we will tell ourselves about it. So, you know, maybe there's dialogue around, well, it's the weekend. Well, I've had a hard week. I deserve this. That again, it's all those it's the language that we use what drives us into the behaviour. So how do we find the balance between the two, that you're still having pleasure and enjoyment, but the wheels don't fall off? And I think sometimes again, that kind of what appears to be that sabotage is, you know, how much of that is your subconscious just repeating the same habits over and over again, and how do you then work on changing that? And a lot of that will probably be the language and what you're telling yourself in your mind. Would tapping work pre-migraine, as you have had really bad cravings then, usually for sugar? It's definitely worth trying. So I would say, you know, what tapping does is it releases serotonin up into the brain. Serotonin is obviously your feel-good kind of neurotransmitter, and it helps to really calm. So if you're suffering from migraines, it might be worth trying doing a little bit of tapping around it. You know, it is a stress reliever, and obviously we know that sometimes migraines can be connected to stress as well. So you could give it a try. You know, YouTube, you can find so many things on YouTube. If you even do like a little Google of EFT tapping for migraines, you will probably find that there'll be a little video in there that you can tap along to. So sounds like you need to change the dialogue. Yeah, and listen, you know, we all do this. We tell ourselves, you know, I've had this conversation quite a lot of times today. We will tell ourselves a story to fit what we want. And, you know, that story might be that I deserve this. I've had a hard day. This is my reward. And the only person we're harming, you know, at the end of the day is ourselves. And I'm guilty of this as well, and this is something that I'm continually trying to work on myself. But these are the wee ways in which we sabotage ourselves. Thanks, I'll definitely try the tapping. Yes, definitely give it a go. I would use tapping all the time just as a stress reliever. If I'm feeling really overwhelmed or I'm anxious about something, tapping will definitely be what I would turn to. So is there any other questions that anybody else has? I'll hold on for a little minute and you can ask me if there's anything you want to ask me. And I hope that what I was talking about there has made sense and resonated with some of you, once I start doing these, I have kind of planned in my head what I want to talk about. Once I start doing them, I just feel like I totally go off on a tangent and waffle and go off on a million and one different directions. So I hope out of all the verbal diarrhea that I just did, that you got some little pointers and some little tips from it. So I don't see any other questions coming through. If you do have any questions or you're watching on replay or anything, that's fine. Just pop them in the comments and I will always come back to them. And next Wednesday, it is always so nice when I have somebody on here with me, because it's so much easier to talk live with someone else than just talking to the phone. So next week I have Jilly Davis coming on, and she is a personal trainer. So we're going to have a lovely chat all about kind of the common fitness mistakes that we make as women. We're going to talk about kind of the ideal type of training that we want to do for kind of weight management, weight loss. And she's just going to be sharing her expertise, giving us general hints and tips. And I think in particular what would be really good for her to talk about is, because we're all so crazy busy with life in general, is how can we find time maybe to even do micro movements, and how can we build in kind of regular movement throughout our day. So that's going to be next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in. And like I said, any questions, just pop them in the comments and I'll get back to you. But enjoy the rest of your evening, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.